good day to those of you who are watching on the Caron YouTube channel. And again, thank you for being here. We have a nice packed room today. And I know there may be people who are watching also around campus on the live stream closed circuit. So great to have you participating that way. I occasionally, I suspect it happens to all of us, I'll be in conversation with someone and they'll say, well, to be completely honest, and it causes me to reflect on what has just been said before, which is like, okay, I guess I should just erase whatever you were saying before. And this takes us right into the heart of the subject matter. I'd like to talk about honesty and its relationship to your intersection with the Caron community and experience. And it's a really important topic. In fact, it's sufficiently important that every fourth Tuesday in the evening I come in to do a lecture titled Sick is Our Secrets, which is a traditional recovery expression. And so those of you who may have heard that a couple weeks ago, I apologize. There will be some overlap. I'm going to try to not take a whole hour. And in fact, I have some extra different things to sort of weave in here. But surely, this is really, really a thing I think is worth thinking about. And it's a rabbit hole. It's a thing that you can get lost in if you want to think about it the way a theologian or a philosopher or I have to always be careful with my language, but a BS artist would. We can get lost in lies, and it's a convoluted terrain. So I have a bunch of points in my mind, and they'll hopefully get us through a message in a reasonable amount of time. One of the first things I wanted to say is that honesty and falsehood are not, in my mind, properly conceived as binary. Although if you look at theories of truth, and philosophy in particular, that's where that goes, which I think is then a grossly oversimplifying approach to the topic. And that what we're talking about isn't something that is a matter of yes or no, I'm being truthful or not. It's, that's of course relevant. But what I'm talking about is the thing of degrees of candor and of falsehood. And I like the word candor. Veracity is another word that is, how candid am I able to be? How authentic am I able to be? How honest am I being? And am I being at any given moment? And I think it's more like one of these things, they call them Likert scales, where it's like I'm being completely honest, I'm being somewhat honest, I'm being mid-range, I'm being somewhat dishonest, I'm being very much dishonest, I'm being completely dishonest. I think it's one of these things that allows for a continuum. And I think the first place that I think about this being applicable, and it surely is relevant here because we have tons of family members, is whether I'm honest with other people in my life. But I also think it's important to acknowledge that sometimes I deceive myself, and also that there's a matter of honesty in a theological sense. When I was a child, I was reared in a tradition that taught me to kneel by the side of the bed and say my nighttime prayers, and also on occasion to participate, this is going to, I grew up in a Roman Catholic family, to participate in what they called at that time confession. And I was a good Catholic boy, and I went to confession, and I learned the rubrics of it, and I think I took it quite seriously at a certain point. And then all of a sudden I realized, doesn't God know this stuff? And that was like a crisis of a certain amount of theological insight as a young boy. I'm like, there's something weird here about me having to tell some old dude this, but behind the rude screen, and which is a weird name, but that's the right term for it. Anyway, to the extent that you might believe in a higher power and how you would conceive it, I think there is some absurdity to the idea that one would hide from God. Years and years ago, I was accompanying some friends who were singers, and I played piano, and a song that they used to sing, which I just love. It's a thing someday maybe we'll do here at chapel, but it's called "Where Can I Hide from Your Spirit? Where can I hide from Your Love?" And it was about the relationship of a human being to God, and that there was nowhere that we could run and hide that God would not see. And I'm a subscriber to that notion. And it informs my thinking about faith really quite profoundly. And one of the things I do think about the idea of the divine is its appeal for those of us who see ourselves as people of belief is an intimacy that's possible. And I think one of the things that's a challenge if you are an intellectually convicted person of atheist, disposition, is that does leave you with seeking belonging and relationship just in the practical sphere. And I'm not saying you can't do that, but I think those of us who experience this notion that even when people leave us, let us down or whatever, that there's a divine presence that can accompany us, it's profoundly comforting, to be sure. And I can try and lie in that relationship. I can very successfully lie to myself. That's another thing. There's lectures here on denial, right? Well, what else is denial but the inability to sort of see honestly where I am? I'm not trying to do too much, I'm not really hurting my family. This is my time, it's my weekend, it's my money, it's my business. Leave me alone. I hate to say how deeply that is true, that it isolates and makes us alone when we lie to ourselves and say that the using is a private matter, when people want to love us and see us instead loving this behavior or substance more than we ourselves. It's a tragic illness, painful, grim, and this is one of its quirks. I think the other lies that are in there are, I'm just going to drink 2 drinks tonight, and apply that more generally to whatever is the substance or behavior I'm concerned about. I got caught, and it's the law's making way too big of a deal of it, but I'm not really as bad as the next person, or whatever. I must confess, here you go, confession, that this is so relevant a topic for me that I am reluctant to be honest about it. Because it's sad for me to tell you how profoundly dishonest I became. I haven't had a drink in 30-some years, and I have been more or less what I would call emotionally sober in the period of time. And one of the measures for me of the growth in my maturity and recovery has been the movement into more deep candor. And a story I was thinking I might tell, and so I'm trying to remember my points and do it. But so a couple weeks ago, I found myself lying, and this is the kind of lie that at a certain point in my life I would have just breezed right by and not even thought it was a lie. But it was a lie in one of the relationships that I prize so much, because I was talking to my wife on a ride up here from southern Delaware. She's down at the beach. And I was with her yesterday and came up this morning. And as I was talking on the phone, I was telling her I was going to talk about her, and always risky. And sometimes she listens. Hi, honey. So this was a couple weeks ago, and I had arranged a surprise for her birthday observance, in which our hopefully future stepdaughter, my future stepdaughter, our future daughter-in-law, get it right, Jack. Anyway, this beautiful, sweet young soul who is connected to our son, Jared. Jared's off in the military serving in Florida in a deployment in the Coast Guard. And this was Judy's birthday. It was a milestone birthday. And I made arrangements for Kayla, the girlfriend, to come to the birthday dinner. It was my one secret. I was forbidden from doing a surprise party. I was forbidden from even doing a special dinner, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, can we have the kids over? Because we have other kids and grandkids. She goes, oh, we can have kids over. But she was wanting to not have this birthday. And I'm like, you can't hamstring me that much. I'm too much of a romantic. So I made this elaborate plan to go pick up Kayla from the train. And also, and then she's like, what are you doing today? And I'm like, well, I have an eye doctor appointment, which was an out-and-out lie. And I actually was going to pick up Kayla at the train. But I did struggle with it. And I'm the person who, how could you tell Jack was lying? His lips are moving. 30 years ago, 35 years ago. I was completely comfortable with deception and honesty, and I would have called it embellishment and diplomacy and all sorts of like crap about why it was okay or necessary. But I became, sadly, I thought I became skillful at it, because one of the things I came to understand was that as a person who was going to be full of it all the time, one of the most important things for me to do was to use the truth to be dishonest. And that might seem weird to you, but the best way to lie is to tell something that's true, that's an obfuscation or a redirection. Because at least when you try to remember, you're remembering what actually happened, instead of some set of fabrications. I'm like, oh, what did I tell Marty? What did I tell Doug? What did I tell Jeb? And the web of deception is like a real thing that happens if you are duplicitous like this. And none of you know anything about what that's about, right? I think this is another point, is that this is a human struggle. Look at my issue of like the rationalized dishonesty with my bride, and I was going to say I'm past that, apparently not, but I'm okay with the reasons why I chose to step out of my code with her, which is raw candor. When she asks me a question, I try to be unfiltered. But I think we live in a world in which we filter our communications, both with ourselves and even with the divine, and especially with one another, based on a variety of constraints. And as I've been thinking about this all week, the constraint that I think most drives the filtering is fear. We're afraid to tell the truth. Why? Well, I think the fear of being candid usually comes either from past hurt, injury, trauma, or lesser woundings, or this anticipation that this is not going to go well, right? So it's a fear-based behavior. And I mean, even the diplomacy thing, like, do you like this dress question, is still a fear thing because I'm afraid of the consequences, but underlying that is this fragility thing, right? And I'm fragile, you might be a little fragile if you're honest with yourself, and so I tiptoe. There's my dear friend and colleague Tina, and one of the things we just had a really, really interesting meeting a week and a half ago where there was like this candor was the agenda, and I thought it was really beautifully healthy, but one of the things that we couldn't do was tiptoe. We couldn't and actually we had executives in the room, and we were like, because they were like, tell us what you feel, and we're like, okay, we're doing it, but I've had that backfire on me. So that's one of the things is that, and then my fragility concerns are at play, because I'm like, I'm not going to tell my boss why, I think something is not ideal, and then find out there's recrimination from that. So to flip the script and become a person of greater candor rather than staying in a degree of denial and obfuscation and deception and diplomacy requires risk. And I was earlier in the week I was thinking it requires trust. Well, trust is great if you have it, but I will tell you, trust is like this precious thing that you build over time. And I think the only way to build it is by risking candor. So if you're like, I'm only going to be honest in relationships where I know that there's trust, then you've got the cart before the horse. You may never get it. The way to build trust is to risk candor and see what happens. So what that means for anyone sitting sort of over here on the scale is that this is the song relatively easy. Well, this is relatively difficult. It's not the most difficult thing in the world, but it's a gutsy move that it begins with the honesty of acknowledging the fear that I have to speak the truth, and then it requires the risk of utterance of, and often it's not just mere fact that we're talking about, it's feeling, it's insecurities, it's so qualitative and subjective. So why is this so important is another thing I wanted to say, which is that when we live behind the deception curtain, two things I think happen as a necessary consequence that are worth pointing out. One is isolation and a degree of shame that goes with it, and another is dislocation, and I mean two very specific things by that. So if I tell you a falsehood, and then you're trying to give me some affirmation, what happens is the affirmation goes to the falsehood. You know, like if you say to me, wow, you're such an honest person, and I know I just was lying, that's an easy sort of indication of it. I'm not able to receive your love. And what happens is when you try to be affirming to me and loving to me, I feel shame, and I become more and more like in this lonely pit. And then the dislocation, one of the things that's beautiful about being in relationship is that we can help guide and coach one another. But if somebody tries to coach me based on the false picture of what I've given them, they're going to tell me, oh, you don't need more treatment. Oh, you probably don't need AA. You know, oh, you'll be fine. When I haven't been candid about where this thing has gotten to, I may not be fine. I'm going to ask for a huge favor. Chris N. at the back, could you do me a huge favor and grab me a small thing of water, please, from the water cooler? So, in this dislocation, the peril of loneliness and of being lost is so urgent because we're talking about addiction and sickness and death, right? Like the stakes are too high. Feeling woozy. I don't know what's going on with that, but so let me just cut to the chase, right? Can we invite you to think about moving to authenticity for the sake of love and for the sake of lives here? This is way too important to not... Thanks. Have you stay off camera. That's great. Thank you. I'm reminded of a scene years ago where Bill was woozy and probably just dehydrated or something. So anyway, this is important. And I'm sad that my health concerns will have like misdirected us. Because my prayer is that people who come here as family members or as individuals suffering from substance use disorder will experience love that empowers them to move to health. Can you stop that? I'm going to just finish up.